Hello, this is Wendy, and welcome back to my series, Mixed Media 101. I am here to talk to you today about a subject that is near and dear to every mixed media artist's heart, every collage artist's heart, and every art journalist's heart, and that subject is fussy cutting. Now, this Mixed Media 101 series has grown a lot since I launched it, and I really wanted to make this video about fussy cutting, but since I launched my series here on YouTube and then brought it over to my Teachable platform, it has really grown exponentially from what I thought it was going to be to what it is. So if you're really interested in this subject and you want to get involved, you could be a beginner mixed media artist, you could be intermediate, even advanced. I recommend going over to Willa workshops on Teachable. I'll put the link here in the video, and I'll also put the link in the description box. But you can enroll in that course right now for free. Who knows, maybe in the future it'll be so epic I'll put a price tag on it. But at least for now, it's a free course. So anyway, so I wanted to make this video about fussy cutting, not because so many people were asking about a video on fussy cutting, but because I remember what it was like when I was brand new to mixed media art and somebody said, oh, you have to fussy cut. And I was like, fussy what? I had no idea what it was. And so it's like one of those subjects that I wish I had seen the video that I'm going to make for you before I started playing with mixed media, because then I would have just known a lot more about it. So anyway, okay, so first off, we're going to talk about what is a fussy cut. So a fussy cut is anything that you can cut out and use in a mixed media collage or an art journal page. So these are all things that I have fussy cut already. And these all come from what's called an art foamy. So they're stamped, and then you have fun playing and colorizing them. And then of course you have to fussy cut them. So just again, I know this is going to seem very basic for people who are already in the world of collage and mixed media, but for people who really have never done anything like this, I just want to take you through what I'm talking about so you don't have a lot of questions. But essentially what's happening is I am using a stamp. Let's say this stamp. This is called an art foamy. There's many different kinds of stamps. This is just one kind of stamp. But you stamp onto paper, or could be fabric, but you basically stamp on and you get the image like you see here. And then you let the ink dry, and then you use either colored pencils, watercolors, markers, acrylic markers, some kind of thing if you want to colorize it. And then once it's dry, you rough cut it out. So the rough cutting part is you would use a bigger scissor. You wouldn't use a small type of scissor to rough cut, because that would just take forever and be pretty awkward. So that's what fussy cutting is. And now we're going to get into the how. So the first part of fussy cutting is just the rough cutting. And again, I really like this large scissor. This scissor is made by a company called Tonic, T-O-N-I-C. It's basically by the Holtz line of products. Tim is an amazing creator and an amazing entrepreneur of all different types of materials for mixed media art. You may have heard of him. If you haven't heard of him, you most certainly will hear of him pretty quickly in the mixed media world. But okay, so I've got something and I've rough cut it, and now I'm going to go to fussy cut it. So the next thing to think about, that I probably should have told you before I started doing this, but you would be fussy cutting out of all different weights of paper. So you might be working on a text weight of paper. This paper that I use is called sulfite paper. But you could also be creating your own imagery on, let's say, a mixed media paper like I did here, or a watercolor paper. So this is a hot pressed, which means it's got a smooth surface. This is a watercolor paper. It's much thicker. It's a cardstock weight of paper, and cutting out of cardstock or a heavier weight paper is going to be more difficult than cutting on a standard text weight paper. But a lot of fussy cutting is done on the lighter weight papers, because fussy cutting is also something that you don't need to necessarily create your images from scratch. You might have a magazine that you really like, and you can start fussy cutting out anything from a magazine that you think is interesting. So for example, I have this magazine Uppercase here. You know, you might not want to cut into your Uppercase magazine, because Uppercase magazine is like such a treat that you might obviously think like, well, I'm not buying that to cut into it. I'm buying that because I want to collect Uppercase magazines. But let's say this isn't an Uppercase magazine, okay? Let's say this is a Vogue magazine, or I don't read Vogue magazine, but I don't know, say House and Garden, okay? I don't have a House and Garden here, but if I had a House and Garden here, who knows, I could have something like this in it, and I might go, oh, I'm gonna tear this page out of here, and I'm gonna fussy cut all of these flowers and keep them in my collection of fussy cuts, because these are gonna be perfect for my art journaling and my collage making. And the weight of a magazine page is actually pretty much as thin as could be. So it's very easy to cut from magazines, but it also can be actually, how do I say this? It's very delicate to cut from a magazine page, because you could easily tear it. So that's why I actually like to work on that paper that I mentioned, which is called sulfite paper, because I use the 90-pound sulfite paper. 90 pound is something that's not super flimsy like a 60-pound, but it's also not heavy like a 140-pound or a 300-pound. So this is nice. I got the 90-pound weight to do all of my stamping and colorizing for the most part. The other thing that you should probably be aware of is a company called Collage Soup. Emily Stone is the entrepreneur behind this brand, and these are wonderful books. She has an infinite number of them, all full of imagery for collage. So this is really perfect for either combining with your own papers and things that you paint and finishing collage work, or a lot of people do all of their collage work just from found things that they find in magazines or books like these Collage Soup books. So this paper is really nice because Emily has obviously done a lot of fussy cutting in her lifetime, and she knows that if the paper is too thin, that it's going to actually tear when she tries to cut in these complicated cuts. So she's really thought about this and made a really nice weight paper for people to actually do their fussy cutting. I mean, these images are so absolutely gorgeous. You could also use these books. I have thought, I don't know, probably other people have thought about this, but you could also use these books as actually inspiration for your own doodling that you draw. Instead of using like a stamp, a pre-made stamp that is an artist's design, you could actually doodle your own designs on something like a sulfite paper or a drawing paper. And you could then fussy cut your own doodles out and have those as images. So there's all variety of ways to get imagery for fussy cutting. And this video is just going to be about your best practices for actually doing the fussy cutting. So I've got a variety of scissors here. I've collected them through the years. I'm going to group them by these are all my Tim Holtz scissors. I actually have two of the really small size. I should get the measurements on these for you. So this is the 5-inch scissor. This is the 7-inch. And this is the 9-inch, I believe. Yeah, I think they call it a 9-inch. Could be a 10-inch, but I think it's a 9-inch. Anyway, you can get these from your local scrapbooking store probably, or like if you have a Michael's, there used to be Joanne Fabrics, Hobby Lobby, those kind of places. I know you guys don't like to hear this. They also sell them on Amazon. You can buy them probably directly from Ranger or other stamps, or sorry, other websites like Simon Says Stamp, or whatever country you live in. If you have suppliers that supply the mixed media world, they most likely carry the Tim Holtz Tonic scissors, because they really are wonderful, wonderful scissors. And they're made of, I believe, titanium, which is great for if you get adhesive on them, because it does not seem to affect the performance of the scissors. The other scissors I have, I got them all before I purchased the Tim Holtz scissors, but they all work really fine. And I think I got this scissor, actually, I know, from a kit that I bought, a bookbinding kit. And actually, I love this scissor. It's a good medium size scissor, pretty much the same as the medium Tim Holtz. And then I bought all these other little ones, because when you're doing cutting around tight areas and little objects, you're going to want to have a little scissor. And as long as you keep it just for paper, I believe that a little scissor like this is something that you would maybe find in a sewing section of a store, but you don't want to use it on both paper and fabric. The other thing that really helps when you're doing fussy cutting is actually to have an X-Acto knife with a fresh blade on it and a cutting mat. So let me grab mine. So I've got an old cutting mat here that I think I've had, God knows, I might have had this cutting mat for 30 or more years. I have really damaged it, but it still works just fine. I'll probably get a new one soon. And an X-Acto knife with a new or new-ish blade. And let's see, the first thing that I'm going to do actually is I am going to do another rough cut, because I just want to show you the difference between cutting on a thicker weight paper versus a just right kind of paper for fussy cutting. I mean, sometimes you can't avoid it, and all, you know, maybe the media type that you want to use is really only going to be usable with a heavyweight paper. But I've even found, honestly, that the sulfite paper does really well with watercolors. There's also, I should mention, Arches paper. Arches brand paper has a 90-pound, which is a text weight, a 90-pound cold pressed and hot pressed watercolor paper, which you can buy it on sites like Blick, probably Cheap Joe's, Jackson's, that kind of thing. That paper, if you're doing watercolor fussy cuts, is really the premium, most ideal paper for watercoloring with fussy cuts. But again, sulfite paper is much, much, much less expensive, like a tiny fraction of the cost, and it works pretty darn well. So, okay, so I've got my scissors here. I've done my rough cutting, and I am going to pick up my medium size. So this is my 7-inch Tim Holtz cutter, and I am going to just begin wherever I feel it's most natural to begin. And instead of using the scissor as the primary means with which I'm cutting, I'm actually using, well, for me, it's my left hand. I'm using my left hand and I'm rotating the paper as I gently press down with the scissor. The other thing to notice is that I'm angling my scissor away from the edge that I'm cutting, and that way I get a much better visual on what I'm cutting. So here I am at a corner again. I'm going to move the paper, not at all the scissor, and it isn't until I get to a point where I'm going to actually be, let's see, cutting a large area that I would primarily use the scissor. So you can see that I'm rounding this corner, and I am, again, I'm squeezing my scissor a little bit, but I'm really rotating the paper. And of course, you're going to have to move your scissors sometimes. Here I am rotating the paper again. You may definitely want to use your reading glasses for this if you are above a certain age. And I'm squeezing the scissor and I'm rotating the paper. And then again, I'm rotating the paper to move in that tight corner. And then it just sort of becomes like driving a car. You sort of get that play between moving the paper and squeezing the scissor. And there's times when you're not going to move the paper, you're just going to squeeze the scissor. But whenever you're going around a corner or something that has a round edge, or you want a totally reverse direction, you are going to be primarily moving the paper with a little bit of squeeze in the scissor. Okay, so I think you get the point on that. I'm just going to lop this off and finish it later. If you have an object that has space that you want to cut away, so negative space that you want to cut away, it's going to be pretty hard to cut that away using a scissor. So that is the situation where you want to use both your X-Acto knife and a cutting mat and the scissor. So in those areas, you're gonna use the X-Acto knife. Do I love using an X-Acto knife for cutting? No, it's not my favorite. Some people can do all their cutting with an X-Acto knife. I find that cutting with a scissor is much, much, much more pleasurable, less dangerous. Easier. Okay, so that's nice, got that. I might want to cut that out, maybe not. If you do have a little area in your fussy cut that you want to mask off, you can always, I don't have a white pen up here, but you can always go in and clean that up before you do your cutting. But I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm picking up my this is my 7-inch scissor, but actually just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to use the 5-inch. Because this is really where you feel like you're in control, is using the smallest scissor you've got. This is so nice. I cannot even begin to tell you. Okay, something else to notice about your Tim Holtz Tonic scissors, if you have them, is that they have one edge which is serrated and one edge which I believe is not serrated. And I have heard that you might want to keep it so that your serrated edge is on the outside, but don't quote me on that. But let's try that out. Right now my serrated edge is on the outside, and I think you do get a cleaner, nicer edge if your serrated edge is on the outside. But honestly, I've done it both ways and I've never noticed that it's affected my finished work in any way whatsoever. So I think it's fine, but that is a tip that I did hear. Probably heard that in fodder school somewhere. So, okay, so there you have another fussy cut image. So actually, I wanted to do one that was really, really, really difficult or had some difficult maneuvers in it. So I'm sure there's harder things than this. By the way, a lot of what's on this page is stencils from Megan Quinlan, who is one of our fodder school teachers. And Megan has been designing and selling her own stencil designs for years and years now. And she's got really, really good collection. She's got an amazing collection actually of stencil designs. So, okay, so the hardest part about this is clearly going to be these little feet. So I'm not even going to try to do them right away. I am just going to focus on the easy parts of the object. And I'm going to save the really finer, tougher cuts for last. So here's a long, relatively straight edge. That's where I'm really using the scissor a lot as opposed to turning, because there's nowhere to turn. So here I'm sort of starting to turn the paper. Here I'm going to be turning. Okay, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but there's a really little spot in there that I'm going to want to really focus on, but not yet. It's too fine for me to try to get in there now. So I'm just going to take away all of the easy parts to take away. Okay, just going to get rid of the easy parts. All right, I'm going back into what is an easy part. And this is on the hot press watercolor paper, but with these scissors and good technique, honestly, it is not difficult at all to be cutting, even on this heavyweight watercolor paper. So don't shy away from it if it's what you got or what you want to use. It's completely doable. So, all right, here is this little indentation in the bird. And as long as I move my paper, I can totally get in there and without a lot of fuss at all. Cut away. And you might have noticed that I'm leaving a really thin white edge of the paper. So that's how I prefer to do all of my fussy cutting when I create watercolor images or doodled images, even just in black and white. If I'm making wonky bits, which I've made a ton of in the past, then I will leave the white edge. But you know, if you're using a magazine image and you're cutting away from a magazine page, you might actually be cutting right up to the edge of the image, which is completely fine. It's all the same techniques. You're just going right up and you're not leaving any white edge. And your white edge does not need to be perfect all the way around. It doesn't need to be the same width all the way around. You're doing your best. It's completely fine. And then just clean this up and dispose of all these little pieces. There's no reason to keep every little tiny scrap. You will never use those. Okay, so let's see. That is fussy cutting in a nutshell. And I just want to make sure that I've gone over everything I wanted to go over. I have a list of things that I wanted to tell. Okay, I do. There's one more thing that I wanted to go over with you, and that's just about storage. So if you've got a lot of fussy cuts, you're going to want to start thinking about how you're going to store things. You can make your own book to store these in. You can store them in boxes, totes, bowls, all sorts of storage units. Like a lot of stuff that's sold at Home Goods in the United States is really perfect for storing stuff like this. I will go over to some of my storage units that I bought off of eBay. You don't have to get anything this unique, but it does become kind of fun when you have a lot of fussy cut pieces. And what is the reason for making all these fussy cut pieces? Like making them in advance and just having them waiting there for the opportunity that you might have that you're going to use it. The nice thing about doing that is basically that when you start art journaling, you're not having to think like, oh my gosh, I've created this art journal page and now I've got to start thinking about taking out all these other materials and making focal points for my art journaling. No, you can actually do all the focal points and create all of this wonderful type of collage fodder, food for your art. You can do a lot of this in advance. So when you make collage fodder, it's really, really fun to make. Okay. I think that's become very obvious to anybody that it's really fun to make. And typically what people do who love making it is you make a lot of extra and you fussy cut it out, and then you store it until you've got the right project that you want to put it on. So creating a lot of this fodder or grabbing a magazine and just doing a lot of fussy cutting for a couple hours, even when you're, again, you could be listening to a podcast episode, listening to an Audible book, watching your favorite show on television or a streaming platform, and you're just sitting there and you've got all these pages and pages of art that you've created, again, or a magazine or some type of book like a collage soup book, and you just sit there for hours fussy cutting. And I know that it sounds crazy, but fussy cutting is really meditative. Like, it's once you get really comfortable doing it, it is just one of the most meditative things that you can do, because you know exactly how to do it. It's not hard on your hands if you're doing it the way that I'm showing you, which is basically by moving the paper and, you know, doing the rough cutting first, then getting rid of all the easy parts. It's just really relaxing. And the way that your pieces look after they've been fussy cut is like 1,000 times better than before they've been fussy cut. There's just something about how these objects take on an amazing quality of wonderfulness when you're done fussy cutting. And also, if this is too much, like you're thinking, oh my gosh, I do not want to cut around all of those petals, you can just cut in a circle and just ignore all the petals. And it'll be just as cute on an art journal page. All right, so just another couple of tips. Going slowly is perfectly fine. There's no reason to rush through this. And if you're at all skittish about it, I would say find a magazine, practice on a magazine. Don't take yourself too seriously. Write it first and do some practice pieces. And I think what you'll find is within a few minutes, you'll be very, very comfortable with fussy cutting. I hope you enjoyed this Mixed Media 101 video, and be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. See you again soon.